I want to start today by asking you to visualize a very specific physical sensation. It's something I think, well, every single person listening has felt, probably within the last 24 hours. You walk into a meeting room, or maybe these days you just log into a Zoom call or open a specific group chat, and before a single word is typed or spoken, you feel it.
You feel the weight of the air.
Exactly. It's thick, it's heavy, or maybe it's frantic and buzzing like static electricity. You can't point to a specific sentence that's causing it, and you can't point to a specific person who is angry. But your body knows. Your shoulders go up, your stomach tightens, you are reacting to something invisible.
It's a universal experience.
Mm.
And usually when that happens, our first instinct is to analyze it psychologically.
Right.
We think, oh, my boss is in a bad mood, or
Yeah.
this team is just anxious about Q4 numbers, or, Dave is being difficult. We look for the person to blame for the vibe.
Yeah, we personalize it. We assume the tension is just a product of personalities clashing.
But today, we are going to look at it through a completely different lens. The source material we're diving into, it comes from the Reflective Humanism series. It suggests we stop looking at psychology and start looking at meteorology,
Meteorology,
as in the weather.
social weather.
So this is the focus of our deep dive today. We are unpacking this concept of social weather or social meteorology. And the core idea here is fascinating because it stops treating society as just a collection of people having opinions and starts treating it as a climate system. And just like actual weather, this system is driven by high pressure and low pressure systems.
Think about it. Wind isn't a thing in itself. It's just air moving from high pressure to low pressure. The source material argues that our social environments work exactly the same way. We aren't just floating in a vacuum. We are constantly being pushed and pulled by two specific invisible forces: information pressure and silence pressure.
I want to set the ground rules for this deep dive because the source material is very specific about the mission here. We aren't here to solve the weather. We aren't here to say pressure is bad. No, that would be like saying gravity is bad. It's just physics. You can't turn it off. The goal today is simply observation. The text calls it a health scan. We want to see if we can act like a weather satellite, just observing these pressures without trying to fix them or debate them or judge them.
They just want to see the map,
Exactly.
which is actually harder than it sounds because our instinct is always to fix the awkwardness. But let's resist that. Let's look at the first massive system on this map: information pressure. Now, when I read that term, I immediately thought of information overload. Too many emails, too many notifications, the fire hose of the internet. But the sources seem to suggest it's something more specific than just volume.
It is much more specific, and this is a crucial distinction. Information pressure isn't just about the quantity of data. You can have a lot of data without pressure. Information pressure is the force that demands you to explain, to visualize, and most importantly, to conclude. It is a force that accelerates judgment.
That acceleration is what I really connected with. It's that feeling when a news story breaks or a new policy is announced at work, and you feel this immediate physical compulsion to have a take.
Precisely. It's the pressure that forces judgments to be brought forward. In a high information pressure environment, speed is valued over depth. The atmosphere demands that you visualize your stance immediately. You have to be a point on the graph. You're either for it or against it, and you need to be there now.
I feel this constantly. It's the "I think I understand" sensation. You read a headline or you hear one soundbite, and suddenly you feel like you grasp the entire picture. It's seductive, actually. It feels like intelligence. It feels like being informed.
But it's often what the reflective humanism texts call the illusion of understanding. And here's where it gets really interesting structurally. When information pressure is too high, we stop treating the world as vectors, which are directions and movements. And we start treating the world as points.
Let's unpack that distinction because it feels technical but really important. Points versus vectors.
We'll think of a complex issue. Let's say a reorganization at your company. That process is a vector. It has a history, it has a direction, it's moving and changing day by day, it's a curve, it's dynamic.
Right, it's a story in motion.
But information pressure demands a point. Is the reorg good or bad? Are you happy or unhappy? Yes or no? When you force a complex vector into a static point, you lose the movement, you lose the nuance. And this leads to a concept from the core field source material called the collision gradient.
The collision gradient? That sounds painful.
It creates a very real friction. Think of it this way. Reality is complex. It's a curve. It's nonlinear. If you are forced by information pressure to rush to a fixed point, a snap judgment, you are essentially driving a straight line into a curved reality. you were going to crash.
So the heat we feel, the arguments in the comment sections, or the tension in a strategy meeting where everyone is arguing over half-baked ideas, that isn't necessarily because people are angry. It's the physical result of that collision.
Exactly. The text describes it beautifully. When we rush to judgment, the recursion, the ability to think back on ourselves, to reflect, it doesn't have time to catch up. We create a collision that results in heat rather than understanding. Information pressure doesn't make us smarter, it just makes us judge faster. It creates friction.
It's like trying to take a snapshot of a moving train. You might get the picture, but it's going to be blurry or you're going to get run over trying to stand on the tracks.
And this is why high information pressure environments often feel so exhausted. Everyone is crashing their mental models into reality over and over again at high speed.
Okay, so that's the high-pressure system. Hot air blowing everywhere, forcing us to judge fast, crash hard, and generate heat. But weather isn't just high pressure. If there's high pressure, there has to be low pressure somewhere else.
Correct. And that brings us to the counterforce, silence pressure.
Now, this one feels trickier to pin down because, by definition, it's not there. Or at least it seems like it's not there.
But it is there. In this meteorological model, silence is not just the absence of noise. It is an active, heavy force. It has density. It arises from avoidance, from conformity, from that very human act of reading the room.
The source material uses the Japanese term sontaku here, right? Which is a fascinating concept.
Yes, sontaku is often translated as surmising, but it means something deeper. It's anticipating someone's unspoken wishes, usually a superior or the group majority, and acting on them before they are even voiced. It's the weight of what remains unsaid steering the ship.
I think this is the atmosphere I was talking about in the intro. You know that meeting where the boss proposes an idea that is clearly, objectively terrible and nobody says anything? It's not just that people are quiet. It's that the silence itself feels like it has mass. It's pressing down on you.
That density is the silence pressure. It steers the group just as much as the noise does. In fact, silence pressure distorts judgment in a very specific way. While information pressure accelerates judgment, silence pressure, it warps it. The source material calls this the rationality of absence.
The rationality of absence, that sounds almost poetic. What does that look like in practice?
It means we make rational decisions based on the outline of what is missing. We perceive the shape of the silence, and that missing shape pushes us in certain directions. If you know there is a topic you absolutely cannot touch in your family, let's say a past failure or a specific relative, you naturally steer your conversation around it. You aren't being censored in the traditional sense, nobody handed you a rule book, but you are navigating the pressure system.
It's like walking around a hole in the floor. You don't have to see the hole to know you shouldn't step there. The pressure of the hole dictates your path.
Precisely. And the structural consequence is that we end up making decisions based on unspoken premises. We nod in meetings not because we agree, but because the silence pressure is so high that disrupting the harmony feels physically impossible. The rational choice in that moment is to stay silent.
And it's important to note, and the source material is very clear on this, we should avoid using words like oppression or censorship or freedom of speech when we're talking about this.
That is crucial. This isn't about a villain silencing the masses. It's a shared atmosphere. Everyone in the room is breathing that heavy air. It's a climate condition, not a crime scene.
So we have these two massive systems. Information pressure pushing us to judge fast, to speak up, to clarify, to be a point. And silence pressure pushing us to conform, to avoid, to steer around the unsaid. And usually when we talk about fixing this, the magic word everyone throws around is transparency.
Yes. We need more transparency. It's the universal cure-all.
Right. If there's too much silence, just dump more information. Open the books, leak the emails.
But let's look at the map we just drew. If you take a system that is already struggling with pressure and you just dump more data into it, does that actually help?
Well, based on the definition of information pressure, if you just dump more data, aren't you just cranking up the acceleration?
You're just feeding the beast that demands immediate judgment. You aren't creating clarity, you're creating a storm. You're increasing the collision rate. The experts in reflective humanism propose a completely different definition of transparency.
Okay, let's redefine it. What is true transparency in the context of social weather?
Transparency is not total disclosure. Transparency is the observability of the pressures themselves.
Oh, I like that. It's not seeing the secrets, it's seeing the map.
Exactly. Can we see where the high pressure and the low pressure are currently located? Can we just acknowledge, wow, the information pressure to have an opinion on this topic is incredibly high right now? Or The silence pressure in this organization regarding this specific failure is extremely dense.
It's metacognition for the group. It's like looking at the weather app instead of just getting rained on.
It connects back to that idea of transparent pain mentioned the core field source. When we try to actually see these pressures, we feel friction. We feel the friction between our internal operating system, which wants simple, linear answers, and the external reality, which is complex.
So real transparency might actually be uncomfortable. It's not just here are the facts. It's here is the awkward tension we are all pretending isn't happening.
It almost certainly will be uncomfortable because it requires us to stop looking for a conclusion and instead look at the gradient.
The gradient. We're back to vectors versus points.
We are. The text suggests we need to maintain a health scan mode. This is a central concept. We aren't trying to eliminate the pressure weather is natural, you can't stop the wind, but we want to observe three things: position, bias, and blind spot.
Okay, walk me through this. Position, bias, blind spot.
Position. Where are we standing in this storm? Are we in the center of the information pressure, or are we on the edge? Bias. Which way is the wind pushing us? Are we being pushed toward anger, toward silence, and blind spot? What are we not seeing because of the pressure?
It's about recognizing, oh, right now, silence pressure is very high in this room. Just naming it changes the dynamic. It turns the pressure from a subconscious force that controls you into a conscious object that you can observe.
It creates a gap, a tiny space between the stimulus and your reaction. And that gap is everything.
It shifts the question from who is right or who is wrong to what is the weather doing.
And that shift from who to what is the most liberating part of this entire philosophy. It reframes responsibility.
This was the part of the deep dive that really struck me personally. We love to find the villain. When a company makes a disastrous decision or a social media mob goes crazy, we want to know who started it? Who is the bad actor?
But the social weather perspective argues that when a social judgment goes wrong, it is rarely just bad people doing bad things. It is usually a failure to recognize the dominant pressure.
So the disaster wasn't caused by Bob in accounting being evil. It was caused because the information pressure to launch the product was massive, and the silence pressure against criticizing the CEO was equally massive.
And in that specific weather system, the bad decision was almost inevitable. The source describes society as a generation field. We are looking for interference patterns, how these pressures crash into each other, rather than looking for a specific villain to blame.
It's a shift from looking for the subject, the person, to looking for the field, the environment.
And frankly, that is a very difficult shift to make. Our brains are wired to blame individuals. It's a linear story. He did this, so this happened. But looking at interference patterns, that requires seeing the gradient. That requires us to ask, what pressure made that decision the path of least resistance?
It sounds compassionate in a way. It takes the target off the individual's back.
It is deeply compassionate, but, and I want to be careful here, it is not an excuse. It is also rigorous. It doesn't let us off the hook. It just changes what we are responsible for.
How so? If it's the weather's fault, aren't I absolved?
No, we aren't responsible for controlling the weather. You can't stop the information pressure of the internet. You can't stop the silence pressure of a hierarchy. But we are responsible for reading it. We are responsible for not being blindly pushed by the gale force winds of opinion or the heavy fog of silence.
It brings us back to that idea of the health scan. If we can just pause and check the instruments. Okay, my pulse is racing because I feel the need to tweet a reaction. That's information pressure.
Or, I have a knot in my stomach and I'm afraid to ask this question. That's silence pressure.
Just noticing that, it creates a phase shift. That's the term the text uses.
Yes. It allows us to move from simply reacting, which is that collision we talked about, to responding. It turns the collision gradient into what the text calls a question gradient.
A question gradient. I love that term. What does that look like in practice?
Instead of hitting a wall, this is good, this is bad, you follow the curve. You ask a question. You keep the inquiry open. You minimize the heat and the pain.
So instead of saying, this idea is garbage, which is a collision, or saying nothing, which is silence, you might say, I'm feeling a lot of pressure to agree with this, but I'm seeing a risk here. Does anyone else see that?
Exactly. You narrate the weather. You make the invisible visible. And that changes the interference pattern for everyone else in the room, too.
It's fascinating because it feels like this applies to everything. It applies to national politics, sure, but it also applies to my dinner table. It applies to how I talk to my kids.
It applies anywhere human beings gather and exchange meaning. We are weather makers. Every time we speak, we add to the information pressure. Every time we stay quiet when we should speak, we add to the silence pressure. We're constantly generating the climate we live in.
That is a sobering thought. We aren't just walking through the weather, we are the weather.
We are the weather, and that is why the concept of reflective humanism is so vital. It's not about being perfect. It's about being reflective.
The source material mentions that we are moving towards a time, perhaps with the help of AI, as a sort of mirror, where we can see these patterns more clearly, where we can see the interference rather than just the argument.
Yes, the hope expressed in the text is that by understanding these mechanisms, we can move from a society of collision to a society of resonance.
Resonance. That sounds a lot better than the friction burn I usually feel after scrolling through the news.
It does, but resonance requires tuning. And you can't tune an instrument if you can't hear the note it's playing. That's why we need the health scan. That's why we need to see the weather.
So we promised at the beginning that we wouldn't give a solution. We aren't going to give you 3 steps to beat social pressure.
No, because there is no solution to weather. It just is. You don't solve rain, you just learn to navigate it. You buy an umbrella, or you learn to enjoy the rain.
But we do want to leave you with something. We want to leave you with an observation to carry with you, a way to tune your own instrument.
We want you to turn on your own internal radar.
So here's a question we want you to sit with today. We aren't asking for an answer, we're just asking you to look.
In the environment you are in right now, whether that's your open plan office, your family living room, or your social media feed, what is the current weather?
Don't judge the people. Look at the pressure. Are you being pushed by the speed of information pressure? That need to know, to judge, to classify right this second.
Or are you being steered by the weight of silence pressure? The heavy invisible shape of the things that everyone knows but no one is saying.
Just look at the map, see the gradients.
And ask yourself, which way is the wind blowing you?
Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
Keep observing.